Hey, folks. For a long time, I knew absolutely nothing about wines. And then my sister worked in Italy for a wine distributor. And then I knew 99% nothing about wines, except for the 1%, which was I'll let my sister decide and tell me what wine it is. I have literally many times sent her pictures of wine menus. Or if I'm in a store, taking pictures of it. But now I don't have to worry about that. And why? Because this podcast is sponsored by Naked Wines. It's 2025. Do you still shop for wine like it's 2005? Naked Wines is a service that directly connects you with the world's finest independent winemakers, so you can get award-winning wine delivered straight to your door. Use our code MAJORITY for the code and the password at nakedwines.com and get their incredible deal of 6 bottles for just $39.99. And I will tell you this, they are my sister approved. We had a bunch for Thanksgiving last year. We got all 6. And they have a wide array of wines. But I had a fantastic Syrah. Yes, nice and peppery.
Syrah.
Naked Wines connects winemakers with wine drinkers directly, allowing for vineyard to your door delivery at up to 60% off what you'd pay for in a store. I also know from my sister that margins are huge. But when you cut out the traditional retail middleman costs and markups, winemakers can pass those savings on to you without skimping on quality. Naked Wines has been around for over 15 years and funds over 90 independent winemakers around the world. With no commitments or membership fees, you can enjoy Naked Wines hassle-free. And don't forget, you can pause or cancel at any time. So just because you got a trip coming up or you a little backlog, it doesn't mean you can't enjoy Naked Wines before or after that much-needed vacation, or just to, slow your roll or start it back up. Now's the time to join Naked Wines community. Head to nakedwines.com/majority. Click enter voucher. Put in our code majority for both the code and the password for 6 bottles of wine for just $39.99 with shipping included. That's $100 off your first 6 bottles at nakedwines.com/majority. Then use the code and password majority for 6 bottles of wine for $39.99. Now time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Merici Vinton, former staffer at DOGE. She was a member of the U.S. Digital Service Department, got absorbed into DOGE, and now she's not there. Also, a former advisor at the IRS and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Meanwhile, Donald Trump seemingly reverses on trying to fire the Fed chair. And simultaneously, Trump hints at reducing China tariffs because it's going so well. I made my point. And speaking of coincidentally, Trump's economic approval rating drops to 37%. And speaking of dropping, Tesla profits crater, but mysteriously, its stock rises. Huh. As Trump stops investigation into Russian war crimes in Ukraine, U.S. offers Ukrainian territory to Russia for peace. Health and Human Services plans to cut National Suicide Hotlines program for LGBTQ youth. Republican House is planning a rescission vote in weeks that may cut substantially more from the government. RFK Jr. launching an autism database. That doesn't sound disturbing. And looking to reverse CDC COVID recommendation, a vaccine recommendation for children. Congressional Democrats travel to Louisiana to demand release of Mahmoud Khalil and Rumsia Ozturk. EPA laying off environmental justice employees, and Veteran Affairs employees are encouraged to report colleagues who appear to be anti-Christian. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. Emma Vigeland off today. Matt's looking at me like, wait, what? The VA anti-Christian?
What does that mean?
This, it was Supreme Court, moot court, I think it was yesterday. Not moot court. Oral arguments, I should say. About the Don't Say Gay bill that schools were trying to get rid of because, you know, some people are gay, and pretending that gay people don't exist is problematic, not just for gay people, but for all people, because you're living in some type of like bizarro world. And schools are supposed to educate. But we are seeing an increasing push from the right. This has been ongoing for the past several decades, where religious values trump, at least in the opinion of the Supreme Court and in conservatives largely, that religious values trump civil values. That your religion can supersede the laws of our society. And apparently at the VA, if there is behavior that, you know, somebody has a religious edict, and I should be more specific, a Christian one. Because I doubt that they would be telling colleagues to watch out for folks who are not allowing people to pray towards Mecca.
Right. I was going to say Islam.
At some point during the day. So, but we may get to that story in a bit.
Just look up Section 28 in the UK, which was the law against promoting homosexuality, as they put it, back in 1988, and how that turned out.
Yep. I mean, it could very well be also if you you have someone who at the VA who refused to work with someone who's gay because their religious values, they don't believe in it. We've seen this in the context of pharmacies and whatnot. Meanwhile, we have a former member of DOGE on the program today. She's going to be talking specifically about stuff at the IRS. But there's going to be a new former member of DOGE quite soon. And that, of course, is Elon Musk. In part, it's because he was a special advisor to the government, and you can only be on for 120 days in that instance. But if things were going a little bit better for DOGE and for Elon Musk, I suspect he'd stick around. According to the Washington Post, Musk is ready to leave his government role because he's tired of what he sees as a litany of vicious and unethical attacks from the left. And one of those people, I guess, on the left is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who was mad that Elon Musk inserted his preferred candidate at the IRS instead of Basant's. That didn't last very long. That guy got booted. Musk is already also, I guess, in an active fight with with 3 or 4 other cabinet members, which is really surprising because he seems like a very charming guy.
I thought you were going to say 3 or 4 other mothers of his children.
Yeah, and yesterday there was a shareholder call where Elon Musk had to reveal that Tesla's net income slid 71% in the first quarter. I can tell you that if our net income slid 71% in the first quarter,
Turn to majority.com.
yours, the only voice you would hear would be mine. You wouldn't be able to see me. And you probably wouldn't be able to listen live. And you may actually have to come to my apartment to hear what I'm saying. This is the other amazing part. The Tesla reported adjusted earnings per share of 27 cents, which missed analysts' expectations of 41 cents. Now, that is a 25% miss. And it's not like these analysts were not aware of what was going on. They just assumed that it wouldn't be this bad. Here's the weird part. Tesla's shares were up more than 3% in after-hours trading on Tuesday after gaining 4.5%, 4.6 ahead of the first quarter report. So in anticipation of this report, the stock goes up 4.5 points, a little more than that. And then when all those people in anticipation of this report hear that net income slid 71%, and adjusted earnings were 25% lower than anticipated, they said, I'm buying more of that stock. Let me tell you what I would do if I was the world's richest man. Now, I'm not, so maybe I don't think the proper way. But if we were going to do an earnings report for the majority report, and it was to come out and say it's dropped by 3/4, and we missed analysts' expectations by 25%, and majority report was a publicly owned company, I'll tell you what I would do if I had billions of dollars. Now, I doubt people are this smart to figure this out. But what I would do in the run-up to the report is I would buy a lot of stock, forcing the price up. And then afterwards, what I would do is buy a lot of stock and forcing the price up. That's what I would do if I were the richest man. But I'm also the type of guy who has hired somebody to play video games for me so that I can get on the leaderboard down at the local pizza place. That's what I used to do when I was a kid. I would pay people to play asteroids for me at the local pizza place so they could put in Sam, and I could brag to all my friends. Meanwhile, here's Elon Musk on his shareholder call yesterday, and still trying to maintain, I guess, his relationship with Trump and being gentle about how much Donald Trump has effed up the whole tariff situation. I mean, we got Trump backing off of the tariffs. We got Scott Bessant going into private meetings going like,
Not actually decoupling.
I think this is probably unsustainable. Incidentally, he also went into a room full of traders the day before it was announced that there was a possibility that things were going to get rolled back, and sort of implied that things were going to get rolled back. And that, I mean,
Nice to have a little heads up.
Nice to have a heads up. Here's Elon Musk.
I just want to emphasize that the tariff decision is entirely up to the President of the United States. I will weigh in with my advice with the President, which he will listen to my advice, but then it's up to him, of course, to make his decision.
Pause it. I love how he couldn't bring himself to say, he may not listen to me. He'll listen to my advice.
Might disregard it.
Yeah. He can't articulate that. I had that same argument, to be honest with you, with my son. My son said, you don't listen to me. And I go, I listen to you, but I'm not going to do what you say.
Look, I'll give you a little car show in the front of the White House, but I don't know if I'm going to go off tariffs.
But my son somehow did not seem so excited that he would just capture my attention. He wasn't bragging about it to his friends. My dad listens to me, and then he does something different, but he doesn't do that. That's weird.
It's my advice, but then it's up to him, of course, to make his decision. I've been on the record many times as saying that I believe lower tariffs are generally a good idea for prosperity. But this decision is fundamentally up to the elected representative of the people, being the president of the United States. So, I'll continue to advocate for lower tariffs rather than higher tariffs, but that's all I can do.
There you go. Elon Musk making a beeline out. In a moment, we're going to be talking to Merici Vinton, former staffer at DOGE, to talk about how they have, and let's be clear, DOGE simply aligned with Republican principles. DOGE was just a mechanism to do exactly what Project 2025 wanted to do. And they're continuing on with the program. They're just moving to phase 2 and going through it through the channels that they had already anticipated having to go through it. And their destruction of the IRS has been a long time desire, I should say, of the right. We'll be talking to her in just a moment. But first, according to the CDC, or what's left of it, fewer men than women meet the minimum daily intake recommendations for fruits and vegetables. I will cop to that probably as well. Matt, you don't even have to say a word. Soda is not a vegetable. Men are more likely to overvalue exercise and undervalue nutrition. That is exactly, I would say,
It's the whole point of exercise.
Yeah.
So you don't have to value.
Enter Ritual. It's a multivitamin scientifically developed for men to help fill nutrient gaps in their diets. I've told the story many times, but for years I would walk out of my annual physical with my doctor and with him saying, calling me up, a couple days later when I get my blood work, and him saying, you're low in vitamin D. And I go, I know. Every year I buy, as soon as I leave the office, I go buy a package of vitamin D. I finish it, and then it's done. And the thing I love about Ritual is it will send you your vitamins on a monthly basis. And not only that, Ritual is easy on your stomach. So what also used to happen to me was I would see my vitamins. I would say, I got to take my vitamins. And then I'd say like, oh, I haven't eaten. I've got to wait until I eat. And then I would forget to take my vitamins. So now when I see my vitamins sitting on my kitchen counter, I eat them. Ritual is science-backed multivitamin for men 18 plus with high quality and traceable and key ingredients in clean bioavailable forms. Omega-3 DHA to support heart and brain health. Vitamin D3 to support normal muscle and immune function. Contains 10 key nutrients and 2 delayed release capsules designed for optimal absorption per day. Like I say, also, it is designed to be gentle on the stomach. There's a minty essence in every bottle. And it's third-party tested for heavy metals and Clean Label Project certified. Ritual multivitamins are vegan. They are non-GMO. They are gluten and major allergen-free and made traceable. So you know where the ingredients in your vitamins is coming from. That is very relevant, particularly when it comes to things like heavy metals, because a lot of places where you get ingredients come from places where they do not have quality control over where this stuff is grown. Essential for Men is a quality multivitamin from a company you can actually trust. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/majority. That's ritual.com/majority for 25% off your first month. Also sponsoring the show today, a product I was using for years before they became sponsor, Delete Me. Delete Me makes it quick and easy and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data and creepoids and phishers are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. Data brokers make a profit off of your data. Your data is a commodity. Anyone on the web can buy your private details. Like I say, this can lead to identity theft, phishing attempts, and harassment. But now you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. What do data brokers do? Your name, contact info, sometimes social security number, home address, even information about your family members, all of your past addresses, your phone numbers, could all be compiled by data brokers and sold online. I want to thank Delete Me for sponsoring today's episode. And as a person who exists in a public sphere, especially one who sometimes says things that pisses people off, I am hyper aware of safety and security. And it's, like I say, it's easier than ever to find this information online. When you get a text or an email that seemingly has your name, it's because they bought that stuff from a data broker. Delete Me is great. They send you a report every month. They show you what they have taken down and from where, and they do it on a regular basis because these data brokers refill essentially their data. Take control of your data. Keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting majority to the number 64,000. Only way to get 20% off, text majority to 64,000. That's the word majority to 64000. Message and data rates may apply. Also, this is a great gift. Listen, everybody knows the number one thing that your mom wants from you on Mother's Day or at any time is for you to call her or visit her. And this Mother's Day, you can call, you can go visit, or you can give her, give her an Aura digital picture frame, which will keep you in her good graces all year long. I will tell you, wasn't for Mother's Day, but went to visit my girlfriend's family over break and brought an Aura frame for them. I thought they would have one. They've got, her folks have a bunch of kids. And I was convinced that they would have something like this. Within like literally an hour, they had 500 photos that was scrolling through it. And it was mesmerizing everybody. I was like, I can't believe this. I mean,
my grandma's obsessed with it.
It's great to watch. Aura Frames was named the best digital photo frame by Wirecutter. It was featured in 495 gift guides last year. Okay. Next time you need to call your mom, you can also send her a new picture of you from that trip you're telling her all about, right from your phone. It could not be easier. First of all, I watched this thing get set up. It was set up very quickly in a household, I can tell you, where I had to help set up the TVs. So I didn't even have to engage in the setting up of the Aura thing. The app is super easy to use. Then you send the app to everybody who wants to populate the frame. It's fantastic. It honestly is an amazing gift. And you know what? You can give people more than one because people like to look at pictures. Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com. You get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's AURA frames.com, promo code majority. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. All right, quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Merici Vinton, former DOGE member. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland is off today. Joining me now, Merici Vinton, former staffer at the U.S. Digital Service Department, which became absorbed by DOGE about, I guess, 3 or 4 months ago, and also a former advisor at the IRS, and was involved in the launching of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau over a decade ago now. Merici, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with DOGE. You were working at the U.S. Digital Service Department. Just give us a sense of what the U.S. Digital Service Department did, and then what happened when Donald Trump won.
Absolutely. So USDS before the inauguration was full of really mission-driven people, engineers and product managers and data scientists and designers who really wanted to simplify the experiences that people have with their government, their interactions, really wanted to put users first. So making sure that if we were designing a form or a new service, that it was something that people understood how to use, because then they wouldn't need to follow up with you, which is how we defined efficiency. And so it was a really great group of mission-driven people.
And I mean, give me just one a broad sense of the challenge involved in that, because I think for some people it sounds like an easy thing to do, but there's obviously like sort of all of these legacy systems that have been developed, and you know, we've talked about this in the context of like the government payment system, and the systems that track Social Security. The primary value you want in systems like that is reliability and consistency. And sometimes that comes at the expense of other things. And it also makes it harder to sort of update. I mean, I can shut down MajorityReportRadio.com, overnight, because if I want to redo the website, but there's a lot of government services you can't do that with.
That's spot on. It's a real responsibility to do this work in a way to not stop or to not have bugs. I'll actually share the story of Direct File. It was a free tax filing service that we did at the IRS. It was hugely successful, hugely loved by its users. And
let me just jump in here and just remind people, it was piloted in 2023, and I think about 10 states.
Yes.
And then it did well enough that it was released for everybody. And this was going to be the first filing year where it was released to everybody, wasn't it?
It was still limited to 25 states.
Okay.
So what we wanted to do is work with states that had the capacity with their IT team. So it was a semi-complicated rollout to states, but it was available in 25 states this year, up from last year. Yes, and it was really loved by users. I wanted to use that as an example because it kind of demonstrates how you can do this really hard work. Taxes are not easy, as we probably can all relate to. And we did it in a way where we worked with users from day one. So every word, every screen on Direct File was put in front of people to make sure it made sense. But then getting to the systems and the complexity, we also had to do that within the IRS environment. We had to make sure that when we launched, not only was it going to be a launch that worked for our users and there wasn't a massive bug, but also that the systems that the IRS has weren't going to be greatly impacted by that launch. And so it's always a trade-off. And what we found is that you always had to have a plan A and a plan B, and sometimes a plan D to get over the line. But it was really important that we made sure that both taxpayers were getting were able to file their taxes, and also that the IRS systems could handle that additional load. And that is what it's like in government, in all government IT teams.
Tell us a little more specifically about that product, because I don't think people realize how, it's both a major achievement in terms of being able to roll this thing out in 2 years to get to almost, half the population, make it available to half the population that would be interested in it. This is if your taxes are relatively straightforward, which they are for the vast majority of people. And it's free. So you don't have to go to, you don't have to use TurboTax. You don't have to go to H&R Block. You don't have to go to all that. So that the technical achievement was big. As a policy thing, it's huge. And the politics behind it are also very difficult because there's a reason why we're the only government, I think, like, sort of industrialized nation that doesn't already have something like this, because there was moneyed interest to prevent this from actually ever happening.
Yeah, it's all true. So I think part of the story for me personally, I moved back to DC from London, and I was very, very surprised that this didn't exist yet, that people couldn't file their taxes for free directly with the IRS. And when I think about the only things that government does, that's one of the core things it must do. And so that was kind of my perspective and the attitude I took to it. But we got the idea as a policy concept over the line, and then we went out to build the product. There were a couple of things that we were really, that were really important to us, in addition to that great user experience and making sure that people with all different accessibility needs could use it. We also wanted to build a team in-house. We wanted the government, we wanted the IRS to have a great product team of individuals from the private sector that really threw their attention, their love, and their focus on it year after year, feature after feature. We did over 40 updates to the product. Over 1,000 updates to the product during filing season, and fixing bugs and making that user experience even better. Also increasing the accuracy. When we would see different rejected rates or reasons come through from a tax return, we wanted to understand, can we simplify the language to increase that accepted rate even more? And so it's really great to see what it's like when you actually have that capacity in-house. And we really wanted to take that, through the wider IRS as far as their overall modernization effort.
Let's I want to get to sort of like you set up almost like the predicate for like a horror movie, because this is you've set you've created the image of like a simplified tax system. Like, for years we would hear like, taxes should be something you could fill out on an index card. And then of course, it's never going to be that simple, but this was about as close to that sort of notion that you could get. And then DOGE happened. What was it? Let's just start with, like, you're working for the U.S. Digital Services, and then you're going over and helping the IRS do this. I mean, the digital services, that's basically what you did across the thing. What happened when DOGE took over, and then what happened to at the IRS, from you, at least from that technical standpoint, after DOGE took over?
Yeah, I can talk about both experiences. So at the U.S. Digital Service, the day after the inauguration, so the first day of the administration, all 162 USDS employees were brought in for 15-minute interviews. So we were kind of that first trial run of what it's like to interview 162 people in a day. And the people, we were told these are new teammates that are excited to meet us. And what we were met with was people who would only provide their first names. If you'd ask a follow-up question, like, what brings you to government? This actually happened not to me, but to my coworker. They were told this is a one-way conversation only. I mean, that's not a very threatening question. What makes you excited to be here? So that first set of interactions really set the tone for this new.
What kind of questions did they ask you?
Oh, they were, who is your favorite person at the U.S. Digital Service? Who's your favorite teammate? What makes you exceptional? What's your favorite product that you've worked on in government? It was so quick, and also the questions didn't, to me, really seem to be with people who understood what they were getting into. And government is, as you said, complex. There's a lot of systems, there's things to know. And asking me who my favorite teammate is doesn't really, I think, talk to the scale of the complexity of what we were trying to do. And what we do every day.
Was it
So that
was it your sense that they were looking for social networks so that in the event I mean, when I hear those questions, it is almost like a bizarro world union organizer. Because sussing out the social networks there, who are the people that I can, where are the, once I establish some type of marker, maybe it doesn't come from you, but if I know that you're friends with, Bill and Mary, and I find out from Mary that she likes NPR or something, then I know that Bill and you may be a problem.
That's a really great question and a really great theory I'd never really thought about or we discussed. We didn't really know what the purpose was until Valentine's Day. So on Valentine's evening at 8:00 p.m., when a lot of people were out to dinner, 43 of my teammates were fired, and without really any reason, or they weren't told. When you come to government, you expect a certain set of policies. It might be, as they say, a bit bureaucratic at times, but that's what you get. And what we did not expect was this kind of weird interview followed by a firing with no rationale, no process. People are immediately cut off from systems, and that's how they found out on Valentine's Day. So I was out to dinner and my phone was off, and my husband was joking around like, let's take a picture of this cool restaurant. And I turned my phone and the notifications were just going wild. And I had to ask my friends, do you still see my name in the system? Because I didn't have my work phone. So it was this really set of chaotic experiences. But I guess, that just sets the tone for everything else that's gone on. In a way, we're just a small microcosm of the larger scene.
Okay. And so once that happens, then what happens at the IRS? Because, we've seen this across many, many agencies. The one thing about the assault on the IRS in particular, it seems to me, is that if your argument is government efficiency, there is no other agency where the return on investment is higher than the IRS. And so every person that you cut, every dollar that you save actually ends up costing you more money. And this is well established. So tell us what your experience was in terms of the way that DOGE, did they specifically, were you as part of DOGE brought in to sort of like efficientize or, I would say undermine the IRS?
That's a great question. And actually, it was pretty firewalled between what is now called Legacy USDS and the new DOGE team. There weren't any interactions across so I view there's the USDS DOGE, and then there's roaming DOGE, so people that are kind of everywhere else and ransacking government agencies. There was not a lot of interaction or facilitation between the two DOGEs outside of a few select individuals who sat across the top. So no, I was already at the IRS through my work with Direct File and then the commissioner and the wider leadership team. So I was there kind of witnessing it as a bystander myself, witnessing kind of what happened. And we had been told, I'm sorry, Secretary Bessent had said publicly that DOGE wasn't going to be inside IRS until after the filing season, so after April 15th. And so kind of what happened to the IRS was a bit delayed from other agencies. So people didn't arrive until actually the day before Valentine's Day, so until mid-February. And immediately—
just so people understand, you're sent as a member of the U.S. Digital Services. You're basically placed inside of the IRS, and they're almost on maybe semi-permanent loan, essentially, right? From agency to agency. And this happens all the time in the government, it seems to me, where you're brought as not so much as a liaison, but as if the U.S. Digital Services is a company and you're, a consultant, in-house consultant, and you're brought in there to operate these things. And theoretically, 3 or 4 years later, you could move on or something like that.
That's a great way to describe it. And that is exactly it. So you could imagine USDS was born out of the healthcare.gov collapse. So people sent in to HHS to help fix it and build it. And so that, that model is we go over to agencies and we try to build trusting, collaborative relationships with our stakeholders. That is actually the core of how I approached my work, was to gain a lot of trust with the people that we're going to be responsible for helping make direct file a success. I wasn't there to fire them. I wasn't there to interrogate them or to question the validity of their work. I was there to actually build partnerships and to really focus on like building a great product for people. That's all any of us wanted to do. And that was how USDS used to work. And the new team that came in, the way I try to think about it, or I guess the patterns that I've seen, not just at the IRS, but at other agencies, is that first, they want access to the personnel systems, and they want access to the personnel systems to fire people. And they want access to the procurement systems to cut contracts that they deem not useful. And then they want access to data. And I'm going to guess that's, to make benefit determinations and eligibility and things like that. USDS, legacy USDS, when we asked for access to different systems, it was to make product improvements to direct file. It was to help databases run more efficiently, to query things faster. It was a completely different set of asks that, were just night and day. So that's what happened when they came over to the IRS.
How much of the when they would do layoffs, or they would do get rid of, they get a hold of the procurement and they would cut off contracts, how much of that was also so that none of these entities would constrain what they were going to do on the data side?
I think my observations was two separate efforts almost. We had a few individuals from DOGE at the IRS, and I viewed it almost as two separate things. One person was really focusing on the modernization and the IT side, so really thinking through the different contracts. But the thing is that, when you're looking at these line items, these vendor contracts, which is how they approach their work, is let's look at the projects and the vendors. You're not just cutting a contract. You're typically cutting a body of work, and a body of work that was delivering things to people. It might not be that. I didn't get the sense that was understood, that they're not just a cost line item. There's also a benefit to taxpayers. Right. That's how I view they approach DOGE, approach direct file. And so there's this kind of wider understanding that seemed to be missing in terms of how they are approaching their work. And same kind of on the personnel side, it just seemed to be without a lot of understanding of a strategic outcome.
I mean, it's understandable in the sense that they would not have a concept of a government that is not looking to generate a profit, but to provide a service. And that the service, there's the price of the service and there's the cost associated, I guess, with the service, yeah. Right? And that someone's going to bear that cost. And it's either going to be the citizen or, by going to TurboTax or going to H&R Block, or the society, through government. So what happened? So what did they do at the IRS? I mean, specifically, what did they cut that? Because again, every dollar spent at the IRS essentially returns 6 or 7, is my understanding. And there's probably a point where you cut it, where I would imagine that it costs even more than $6 lost for every dollar cut, because you hit a threshold where it's like, we can't go after any of the big whales because we just don't have the resources to go after somebody who has an army of accountants. So it sort of drops off a cliff at one point.
So I'll answer the question in a few parts. When I joined the IRS as a detailee on loan from USDS in 2022, all of my IRS colleagues talked about was how little capacity they had or ability they had to answer the phones. Only 12% of phone calls were answered. And there were these front page that year. There were these front page stories in national news with photos of paper backlogs, so people's tax returns at processing centers in the Midwest. And with the Inflation Reduction Act, there was a lot of hiring, a lot of new technology investment that went to reduce that paper backlog and to increase the ability for the IRS to answer calls. And we got it up to 88% the next year, which is heroic that even was possible. So when you ask what they're cutting that capacity. I really worry about what it's going to look like next year during filing season, what the wait times are going to be. This year, a lot of the filing season efforts were kind of held off from the initial probationary firings, but I know that there are RIFs coming now that filing season is over. And so that's, I'm sorry, reduction in force. So that is the process by which people are being fired or placed on an administrative leave. So not working, laid off. So I worry about next filing season. That's on the taxpayer side. On the call center side, when you get to the higher audits, go ahead.
Yeah, before we get to the audits, I just also want to make it clear that when the response time, when the backlog increases, when the phone calls don't go answered, that is a cost borne by the citizen. And to be clear, it's a cost borne by the people probably in the top 75 percentile of earnings. Above that, they have accountants who are waiting on the phone. They have, H&R Block that's waiting on the phone, or they're not having to do it. So the cost associated to, wealthier people is less. Doesn't inhibit their productivity. They don't have to take time off from work. They don't have to use their day off or whatever it is.
That's exactly right. I mean, I remember I was at a shop in Pennsylvania, and a woman said, she didn't know where I worked. She was just talking to her friend and said she'd been on the phone on hold for 7 hours the previous day. And she had to finally hang up. So that's an example of what it was like. And there were plans to have better technology to make it so that it was less reliant on, so many call center agents. There are ways to make it all more efficient. And we were all going in that direction. But unfortunately, never got there. And that capacity and that team has been cut on the compliance side. So effectively what the Inflation Reduction Act did was to kind of rebuild a whole bunch of the capacity to go after and to explore those larger, more complex cases. Obviously, it did happen, but not at the scale and the pace of which these large corporations or high net wealth individuals were growing. And those were there were probationary firings in February. Roughly 7,000 people were probationary means they were new, right? So new talent hired in the last 2 years.
New talent or promoted talent.
Yes. So you're your brand new excited teammates, and also the ones that had achieved a lot of really great work. Within the IRS, the teams that do that auditing, it was 90% their teams that were impacted. So of the 7,000 people, roughly 6,700 were fired during the probationary firings. And I expect that ratio to continue as they go through more layoffs. So it's just, I don't know what next season is going to look like in terms of, the call center, but also in the IRS's ability to explore those large cases.
And just want to make it clear too, the Biden administration, when they hired these new, essentially compliance officers, people who are just going to audit and make sure that, wealthy people are paying the taxes that they need. And you can see you can see a graph from the funding of IRS and the relative amounts of audits that were performed based on high earners and in mid to low earners change as the budget for the IRS shrinks. The percentage of high earner audits take place drops because it's just much more work intensive, and you don't have those resources. You go for the low hanging fruit, which is someone who doesn't necessarily have a lawyer, doesn't have an accountant, and these people are brought on during the Biden administration with a vow that people who earn under $400,000 will not be subject to more audits. That number is not going to change. The only number that's going to rise are people who are making over $400,000, I think it was.
Yep.
And so those are the people who are cut because those are the people brought on. And it's a field day now, I would imagine, if I'm an accountant and I'm advising someone of that type of income, I'm like, maybe a year ago, I would have said, don't take this deduction or whatever it is. But today, yeah. I mean, that's basically the dynamic.
Anecdotally, that dynamic is playing out across, friends. And also so DirectFile had a customer support team. It was all live chat, and people were consistently asking that, like, is the IRS going to be here by the end of April? Maybe I can just not pay my taxes. People are volunteering those questions. And I think, so I think that's not a dynamic that's playing out, not just among people who think that they can kind of find an extra loophole, but also there's a real kind of shaking in the trust in the system, the trust that, DirectFile or the IRS are going to be there for people. That was echoed all throughout filing season, unfortunately.
And so what happens to DirectFile going forward? I mean, it's sort of like year one of its sort of, I guess, non-probationary period, and it was expanding. Does it expand now? Does it shut down? Is it functioning? I mean, what happens?
So DOGE has indicated that they want to shut DirectFile down. And that has been devastating news. It was reported by the AP last week that is their intent. They've not confirmed that, but it was definitely where the conversation was going when I was still inside, actually, frankly. And unfortunately, that continued. Again, there didn't seem to be a lot of logic behind it. DirectFile is a startup. It is a startup within government. We thought that there would be some interest there, maybe there was a Venn diagram of efficient products that people love, interest in that, and there wasn't at all, apparently. So it takes a lot of trust with states, a lot of relationship building with states, and there had been no conversations with states as well. So unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be another line item that they've just decided to cut. And the DirectFile team, I'm not sure what their future is. They don't know what their future is. And, it's really just devastating for not just taxpayers. I think it's also devastating for the IRS itself. That team was so talented, is so talented.
Do you have a sense of how it worked this filing season?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the Net Promoter Score is a very common private sector kind of promoter or score index that says how much people like your product or not. So last year, DirectFile's was plus 74, just it's astronomically high. Apple's is 72. Wow. This year, it was 84, plus 84. So somehow the Net Promoter Score, which was already inordinately high, got even higher. DirectFile users, it increased their trust in the IRS by 86%. So you can actually increase trust in government when you deliver really great things that they love. So it went really well this year. There were no bugs. Everyone that used it loved it. Some of the feedback that people gave.
That's amazing to me. Yeah. That is amazing to me. In the best of times that you would have a product rollout that was so effective. Yeah. But I would imagine that everybody associated with that was preoccupied to some degree with the idea of like, is this going to exist tomorrow? Do I have a job tomorrow? Am I at 8 p.m.? Am I going to get a notice that I'm fired? And yet the thing was that successful.
You're absolutely right. That's what it was like for that team all filing season. And people were openly speculating. Elon Musk had tweeted a confusing tweet in February that led some people to believe that direct file had been shut down. It hadn't been shut down. It was doing great. And so all throughout filing season, the team just had to focus on delivering more features. They rolled out. So an internet meme had always been, why doesn't the IRS just tell me how much I owe? Instead, they ask me, I get it wrong, and they throw me in jail. And the direct files team started to input what they knew, what the IRS knew about you into the tax return. It started to do that pre-population, and people loved it, and it worked. The IRS was using that as a use case for its modernization efforts. And so it is just really, that happened during filing season. So it's just really a devastating situation for the team and for taxpayers.
One more question on that specific part before I hear, when you left and why, and a little bit more of that. With the pre-population of information into a taxpayer's profile, if something like that grows, right? I mean, there's in a fantasy world where Elon Musk does not exist, where Donald Trump and the Republican administration does not exist, and Republicans' desire to cut the IRS does not exist. As it moves forward and grows, that pre-population of the profiles, the ability to provide people, let's say, direct payments in a pandemic situation, or the child tax credits, that becomes incredibly almost like a Venmo subscription. It would have made everything much easier, because that once it's pre-populated and these profiles exist, the idea of Treasury using that information as a way of sending money to citizens becomes much more viable, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You're spot on. And so much of actually the direct file team was born out of the child tax credit expansion era. And we saw the need for a free tax filing product, because we needed to reach out to people and find people that had never filed their taxes before and were eligible for the CTC for the first time. And then also, for exactly as you're pointing out, the ability to quickly and rapidly deliver a benefit through the stimulus checks. Had that been something that was more automated, it would have made taxpayers' life significantly more simpler, more straightforward, and government. So it would have been a lot more efficient.
And frankly, the economy, because the difference between waiting, a month for a check versus having that money in your bank account that day, you're going to see the impact of that much quicker. Okay, so when did you leave? When did you leave DOGE? Why did you leave DOGE?
I left on March 11th, and I had remained around for a while. I was trying to make the case for direct file. I had a large team at USDS that was supporting direct file, as well as the IRS team. And as it became more and more clear that there was not really nobody's really listening to the arguments, I decided it was my time to leave. It was really difficult to do work. People were fighting across the IRS and across the federal government. People were fighting both to do their jobs and for their jobs. And it just wasn't really a sustainable place. So that's why I left.
One last question. Who was in charge of DOGE when you were there?
I would love to know that answer. The acting administrator of DOGE.
Was it the lady in Cancun on vacation?
So Amy was the acting, or was I don't actually know. So was the acting administrator sometime towards the end of February. Prior to that, there had been no decision making for legacy USDS. So there was nobody to approve a travel request or say you can have a bigger team until Amy was appointed acting administrator.
Did you ever meet her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, you did. So she was actually around.
Yeah, she was. And we'd overlapped briefly when I first joined USDS. She'd done a lot of the COVID work, and I did child tax credit expansion. So yeah, she came back in December.
She was already at USDS.
She was there,
already
and she
in the
left.
digital services.
Mm-hmm.
She left and then she came back.
Exactly.
and found out that she was in charge of DOGE.
Correct.
Great. Did you ever meet Elon Musk?
I did not know.
Yeah, I was going to ask if he like actually made eye contact. I would be curious about that. Is there anything else you feel like we should know? I mean, I know that you were involved in some of the early stages of Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I imagine a lot of your experience within the IRS was replicated at agencies throughout the government. I mean, it does feel like, now that we're seeing are we up to number 4 or 5 acting directors of the IRS? This is not. I'm not. We literally are, which is fascinating. I guess my last question would be, and maybe this is sort of outside of your perspective, but there's a sense that DOGE was a tool by an existing agenda that was sort of laid out in Project 2025, but also predates that in terms of, particularly in the context of the IRS, but other agencies, getting rid of the Department of Education, et cetera, et cetera. How much of that did you observe? Was that observable in conversation you had with other, with other members of the digital services that may have been embedded in other agencies? Could you observe that? Like, were the ideological agendas behind these instruments, were they clear? Were they differentiated in terms of personnel at all, or approach? Because I think we've moved past sort of like DOGE's attempt to do whatever they were attempting to do, which largely seemed to have not saved the government any money at all, but have created the mayhem that almost like a rototiller goes and loosens up the soil. And now we have Russell Vought's sort of like a wave of assault on the government coming, where it's more RIF, as you say, reduction in force, which is different than what the DOGE approach was.
So I was actually open-minded and a bit excited to have a team of technologists come in that said that they wanted to add more engineers and they wanted to bring more people into government with these skills. That's something we've been advocating for. It's what we did at the CFPB. We were one of the first in-house teams actually globally. and so it was like, oh, great. And it became really clear. I think the Bureau of Fiscal Services, the payment systems, it became very clear that, we are here for very different purposes. And that ideology, to me, that was that first, observation was like, okay, this is 2 different missions. And, with old USDS, we would come in and we would want to touch those systems to make them, get you a tax refund quicker, or to pass a payment through to the New York State Health and Human Services, for their Medicaid payment more efficiently. And these individuals came in to shut it off, to say, nope, I'm not going to pay you, and I'm not going to pay you because I don't feel like it. I don't really like you. And that's when the ideology became very different. I think beyond that, there's been nothing built. Nothing built. Everything has just been indiscriminate cuts of people out of government or cuts of programs. And that's what I worry the most about, is how are we what's going to be left, right? What's going to be left? And are people going to be able to get through this? Is it going to impact Social Security checks and payments? Is it going to impact tax refunds? But then beyond that, how do we rebuild from there? And I think, I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful. I think we can build. I definitely think that we have helped. We've built ourselves and we can redo it again. But it's going to take a very ambitious vision and thousands of people to help us do that.
What were people saying about that payment system? Because we had Nathan Tankus on the program, who was one of the people to ring one of the first alarms about the DOGE people messing in around the payment system. But there's also sort of like, there's the technical aspects of that. And then there's also the sort of the way that you instrumentalize that system as a way of just sort of like having more authority than you should have. Because if you have the ability to just basically take money out of, you mentioned, New York payments, if you have the ability to take money out of someone's ledger within the government, it begins to undermine money in a way. I mean, I was just reading Nathan Tankus in his interview with Paul Krugman. If I give you $1, you walk away with that $1. It's quite clear that you have that $1. That's your $1. And, you may decide to give it back to me or not. But if I give you money electronically and then have the ability at any point to pull it back, it begins to undermine the way that we perceive money on some level, as it becomes increasingly just a question of a ledger.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty stunning to see. It's my understanding that during the transition, so a friend at BFS said to me, nobody's ever come to us during a transition. And typically, like, a new administration will come to us 6 months in.
BFS?
Bureau of Fiscal Services, sorry.
Okay.
The organization that oversees the payments. And they sit within Treasury. They're a low-key agency. Their job is to do government payments to individuals, to other government agencies, and to people that, to organizations that the government owes money to.
This is complete operational stuff. There is no policy implications to what they do. They just execute what the policymakers have done, and what they're clock makers, essentially.
Absolutely. And there was not an understanding that that's how it works. I think what DOGE had intended to do, and was made public with one of the first weekends during the administration, when the head of the Bureau of Fiscal Services was asked to do something to stop a payment to USAID. And he said, no, that's not how this works. And then he was pushed aside. And his BFS was there to facilitate the payment. It wasn't BFS's decision to, that the originating home agency of that payment was the ones that wrote the policies that said, this is a legitimate, payment request, facilitate it, BFS. And DOGE, I believe, really learned a lot that weekend, which is, this organization is just here to facilitate those payments. And it is very different than the private sector, but that is what that organization does. And to me, that was one of the first kind of insights into the differences in ideology.
It's interesting stuff. Merici Vinton, former staffer at the U.S. Digital Service Department. I hope you have an opportunity to return someday under better circumstances. I suspect there's a lot of people who, we've lost in terms of government service. People who are just looking to serve citizens, and hopefully they'll be in a position to be able to come back at one point, and will do so. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Great conversation. Thanks.
All right, folks, we're going to move into the fun half of the program, wherein we will have fun. I think, I just saw some polling that just came out, actually, from the PCCC, the Progressive Change Progressive Change Institute. Wait, is that what it is?
Progressive Change Campaign Committee?
Yes, but this is, I think, from the Change Institute and Data for Progress. And they were looking at messages that resonated across partisan affiliation. And it's interesting. wrong approach to efficiency about DOGE was number one. And it was, if we want the government to be more efficient, we should crack down on corporate tax cheats, not cut benefits from families and veterans and seniors. Was the best performing with all likely voters, best performing with independents, best performing with Republicans. Apparently it was the third best with Democrats. The first best with Democrats was Musk and DOGE are stealing from you by cutting Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. But I would bet that the political orientation of people in the U.S. digital services ranged from like center to center, broadly speaking. They were just in there. They're engineers, and they're in there. They're very much, in my experience with engineers, they generally say stuff that you don't understand and think that you do understand it. That's been my experience. But also are very project oriented. And so I don't know. That's maybe a good interview to send around to your DOGE supporting relatives. Because, I mean, that is just undermining the government. It really does feel like that the value to the ideological project that the Republicans have was that DOGE just went in there and functioned like a rototiller.
Yep.
And just loosened the stuff up. And now Russell Vogt comes in with all of those Heritage Foundation resumes and takes the little skid steer and starts to scoop up that loose soil. It's springtime, so that's where my mind is. Tilling and gardening and
cultivation.
Folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, you get the free show free of commercials, which means you don't have to listen to those annoying commercials. Now, I will say it's always worth going to check out the show notes because you get discounts on products that I genuinely use and like. But you can just go straight to that and not have to hear me talk about it. Also, you keep this show keeping on. Help us survive and thrive by becoming a member today. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, Just Coffee. Remember them? 10% off, right, Russ? We fixed that in the YouTube? Great. 10% off with the coupon code MAJORITY. You can get the Majority Report blend. You can also get the other blends. You can get that really bitter WTF blend if you want. But justcoffee.coop. Matt, Left Reckoning.
Yeah, before I get to that, it occurs to me the VA does abortion care. So I imagine that might run into some of the Christian issue there, the anti-Christian stuff. Last night on Left Reckoning, actually, we had Megan Day on talking about a lot of things from DOGE to tariffs to trad wives. And her take on the DOGE thing is kind of just what we were talking about, which is to look at how a place like Wells Fargo looks at it, which is, the USPS is on the chopping block. Let's try to get a strip of that prime profitable steak. And, the people who aren't, we can't service profitably, screw them. Good luck to you in rural North Dakota, for instance, folks who've had their post office person for decades. But yeah, check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get access to the postgame.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. Head to the fun half. We will take your phone calls. We will read your IMs. We will tell funny anecdotes about the news today. See you there. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What is that going on? It's nuts.
Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt,